What if the man Meghan Markle once praised as her guardian angel, the very figure she said saved her and Harry from collapse, became the same man who turned around and unleashed the most humiliating scandal of her life? That question isn't just rhetorical, it's the pulse of this story. Because when Tyler Perry, Hollywood's powerhouse producer, actor, and billionaire friend to Meghan and Harry, allegedly let loose private, shocking footage, the Duchess's carefully curated public image began to unravel like never before. And the moment Meghan, in her panic, uttered the words, "Tyler Perry forced me," it ignited a firestorm that would travel from Beverly Hills to Buckingham Palace and back again. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You can feel the irony, can't you? For years, Meghan painted Tyler Perry as the ultimate protector. He wasn't just a host who opened his doors. He was described as a confidant, a benefactor, the man who allowed the Sussexes to hide away from the glare of a furious British press after they abandoned their royal posts. Tyler Perry's mansion became more than a home. It became a symbol. It was marketed to the public as proof that Meghan still had Hollywood allies. Proof that despite the monarchy turning its back, someone still cared enough to provide sanctuary. But here's where the story gets twisted. Sanctuaries can transform into prisons, and protectors can become accusers. Now ask yourself this, why now? Why is this scandal exploding in 2025 when Meghan is already juggling Netflix backlash, whispers of fraudulent surrogacy claims, and ongoing battles with the royal family? The timing alone should make you raise an eyebrow. In fact, one has to wonder, was this leak truly accidental? Or was it a carefully timed detonation designed to strip Meghan of her last card, sympathy? Let's dig deeper. Imagine the optics. Meghan Markle at home, in private, filmed in moments the world was never supposed to see. Not polished, not rehearsed, not styled for Oprah or Netflix. Raw, unfiltered, vulnerable, and then captured in the most compromising, bizarre, and damning context possible. This wasn't Meghan holding Archie or baking bread in a Montecito kitchen. No, this was different. This was the kind of content that, once out, could not be clawed back. And so the panic began. Meghan Markle, the woman whose every public move has been about control, image, manipulation of narrative, was suddenly the one being manipulated. You can almost see her storming around Montecito, frantically calling PR teams, firing off messages to lawyers, demanding that every trace of the footage be buried. But here's the catch. Once the genie is out of the bottle, once a leak begins to spread, you cannot unsee it, you cannot unshare it, and you cannot unhear the words that were spoken on tape. Let's not forget, Tyler Perry was never just some passing acquaintance. He was Harry and Meghan's escape hatch from the monarchy. When they left the UK, when their ties to the palace frayed, Tyler Perry provided housing, security, and connections. He became the man they leaned on when no one else would help. Oprah may have given them the stage, but Tyler Perry gave them the stage lighting, the safe house, the scaffolding to present their new lives. Meghan herself once said he saved them. And yet, fast forward to today, and that very savior is painted as the villain in her desperate narrative. Tyler Perry forced me. Let that sink in. Forced her. It's a word loaded with implication. A word that instantly flips the victim-perpetrator dynamic. A word that, whether intentional or a slip of the tongue, guarantees global outrage. And that's where the contradictions pile up. Because if Meghan's story is true, why stay silent all these years? Why praise Tyler publicly? Why continue the friendship and accept his help? But if it's not true, then what does it say about Meghan's willingness to destroy someone else's reputation in order to salvage her own? And here's where this story grips the public imagination. It isn't just about one woman's alleged scandal. It's about the collapse of an empire she spent years constructing. Meghan wanted to be untouchable, a duchess turned Hollywood power broker. Instead, she's at the mercy of a man she once saw as her greatest ally. The poetic irony is brutal, and audiences can't look away. Think about this. The Meghan Markle brand was always built on a contradiction. She wanted to be royal but rebel, a feminist icon but a Hollywood climber, a victim of the monarchy but a profiteer of its name. And now, caught in the alleged footage and scrambling with her claim against Tyler Perry, that contradiction is bursting wide open for the entire world to see. The middle of this drama is where the stakes sharpen. Meghan knows what she risks here. Tyler Perry is not just another celebrity. He is a titan. His studios employ thousands. His influence stretches from Atlanta to Los Angeles. His allies include the most powerful voices in Hollywood and beyond. Accusing him of coercion, whether intentionally or through a panicked slip, is like stepping in front of a freight train and insisting it stop. The reality? That train doesn't stop. It barrels forward, crushing everything in its path. But Meghan has always been a gambler. That's what makes this story so magnetic. Remember the Oprah interview? Remember the Netflix docuseries? Each time, she played the victim card at the highest stakes, expecting the world to side with her. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But this time, it feels different. Because for once, she's not standing against a distant, cold institution like the monarchy. She's standing against a man who once showed her humanity, kindness, generosity. And that makes the betrayal sting in ways the public can't ignore. And let's talk about the public. Why does this matter so much right now? Because Meghan's influence is waning. Her deals are collapsing. Her allies are retreating. Her carefully crafted aura of importance is dimming. And just when she needed stability most, the Tyler Perry scandal detonates. The public isn't just watching for gossip. They're watching to see if this is the moment the Meghan Markle experiment ends. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Meghan's own words may have sealed her fate more than the footage itself. A video clip can be debated, dismissed as edited, or explained away. But once Meghan spoke, once she tried to reframe the narrative by alleging force, she opened a door she may never be able to close. Because now, it isn't just about scandal. It's about credibility. It's about whether her voice, her testimony, her narrative carries any weight at all anymore. So we circle back to the opening question. What happens when the man you once called your savior becomes your destroyer? Meghan Markle is living that nightmare in real time. And for Tyler Perry, whether he planned it or not, he now holds the power to decide how this chapter of her life is remembered. Why did Tyler Perry, a billionaire who could choose anyone to protect, suddenly decide to open his mansion gates for Meghan Markle and Prince Harry? Was it pity, strategy, or something far more complicated? That's where this chapter begins. Because to understand the scandal of 2025, you need to rewind to the bond that shocked both Hollywood and the monarchy. Think back to early 2020. The world was still buzzing about Harry and Meghan's exit from royal duties, Megxit, as the tabloids called it. Overnight, the couple went from being the jewel in the crown to fugitives of tradition. They had cut ties with the palace, rejected the Queen's conditions, and stormed across the Atlantic. But what happens when you renounce your royal privileges? You lose funding, you lose security, and most importantly, you lose the protection of the crown. That's when Tyler Perry entered the picture. The mogul behind Medea. The man whose studio lot is larger than Disney's. A billionaire who built his empire from scratch, going from homelessness to Hollywood domination. Out of nowhere, Meghan and Harry were given sanctuary in his sprawling Los Angeles estate. 22 acres of fortress-like privacy. Security guards on call. Chauffeurs. Luxury. And silence from prying eyes. But let me ask you this, why? Why would Perry, who barely knew the couple, suddenly take them in at their lowest moment? Some said it was compassion. Perry had been through battles of his own. He knew what it meant to be hunted by the press, to be humiliated in public, to be betrayed by people who pretended to care. Maybe he saw himself in Meghan, a survivor, someone misunderstood. Maybe he wanted to give back. But others weren't so convinced. Was it calculated? Was Meghan playing her Hollywood Rolodex, securing a new stage after burning bridges in Britain? After all, she had Oprah in her corner, and Oprah had Perry on speed dial. Connections opened doors, and Meghan had always known how to step through them. Here's where the contradictions begin to mount. Meghan, in interviews, spoke about Perry as though he were an angel. She told the world that he gave them a safe place to heal. She praised him, thanked him, and positioned him as the man who offered her and Harry salvation. But if you read between the lines, you can already sense the irony waiting to explode. Because that same man, the man who sheltered her, would later become the one to expose her. Let's zoom in on those months inside Perry's mansion. Can you imagine the tension inside those gilded walls? Harry, fresh off the loss of his homeland, brooding about his decision. Meghan, still raw from what she described as betrayal by the monarchy, but also scheming about what came next. Perry, the ever-watchful host, caught in the middle. It wasn't just hospitality. It was surveillance. And that's the piece no one talks about. A house like Perry's isn't just protected, it's monitored. Cameras, guards, logs. When Meghan and Harry moved in, they weren't just entering a sanctuary. They were stepping onto a stage where everything could be captured. Every argument, every late-night call, every whispered plan. Now, put yourself in Perry's shoes. You're housing royalty. You're covering their costs. You're giving them protection. But you're also watching, learning, recording, not necessarily out of malice, but out of habit, out of self-preservation. And over time, those recordings pile up. They become insurance. They become leverage. That's the seed of betrayal. That's the foundation of the footage that would later leak. And yet, in those early days, Meghan had no idea. She strutted through the mansion gardens, hosting Zoom calls, dialing into interviews, working with PR teams, shaping her next chapter. To the world, she was thriving. To Harry, she was determined. To Perry, she was unpredictable. But here's the twist. Meghan's reliance on Perry wasn't just logistical. It was psychological. When you cut yourself off from one world, you need a bridge to another. Tyler Perry became that bridge. And Meghan leaned hard on him. Too hard. Remember the Oprah interview? The one where Meghan and Harry accused the royal family of racism, isolation, and cruelty? That interview was staged in Montecito, but it was birthed in Perry's house. Plans were drawn up there. Calls were made. Narratives rehearsed. Meghan's transformation from Duchess of Sussex to Hollywood victim queen began on his property. So why does this matter now? Because every story Meghan told about Tyler Perry as her savior becomes the knife she twists into herself today. Every thank you, every glowing remark, every anecdote about how he saved them. They're all contradictions now that she has panicked and uttered. Tyler Perry forced me. Think about the irony. She weaponized Perry's generosity into PR gold. But now, that same generosity is being reframed as coercion, as if the man who opened his doors to protect her somehow turned predator. It's a claim so shocking that even Meghan's most loyal defenders had to pause. And here's the question you have to ask. Is Meghan panicking because the footage is damning, or because the man who owns it is untouchable? Tyler Perry is not the monarchy. He's not some stiff royal who hides behind tradition. He's a mogul with teeth, with lawyers, with media power that can crush reputations in a heartbeat. Meghan picked the wrong enemy. But here's the most unnerving thought of all. What if Perry planned this from the start? What if taking Meghan and Harry in was never just about charity? What if it was about control, influence, insurance? After all, what better way to secure leverage over two of the most famous defectors in the world than to keep them under your roof? And Meghan walked right into it. Because soon after, the whispers began. Whispers of recordings, whispers of footage, whispers of freak-off moments captured in private. But that's the thing about whispers. They don't stay quiet for long. And when the first leak hit, Meghan realized too late that her bond with Tyler Perry had never been what she thought it was. Because the man she once called her savior was about to become her undoing. But the real nightmare? It wasn't the footage itself. It was the words Meghan spoke when she tried to explain it away. And that's the part no one was prepared for. What really happens when cameras are off, but the microphones are still rolling? That's the haunting question that echoes as we move deeper into this saga. Because if you think Meghan Markle's panic was bad when the rumors first swirled, wait until you hear what the secret recordings allegedly captured. Every fortress has cracks. Every mansion, no matter how private, leaves shadows where truth hides. Tyler Perry's estate was no exception. Behind the manicured hedges and the state-of-the-art security system lay an even greater secret. A network of surveillance that watched over not just Perry himself, but anyone who stepped foot into his kingdom. And Meghan and Harry? They weren't exceptions. Now, pause for a moment and let this sink in. Meghan believed she was in the safest place on earth. She strutted through the hallways with the confidence of someone untouchable, making private phone calls, whispering strategies, and yes, letting her guard down in ways she never would in public. But in a house like Perry's, nothing goes unnoticed. Have you ever thought about how powerful people protect themselves? They keep records. They document everything. They create backups of backups. Not because they expect betrayal, but because betrayal is inevitable. And Perry, who built an empire on resilience and survival, knew better than anyone how quickly friends could become enemies. So when Meghan and Harry settled into Perry's house, were they house guests or unwitting characters in a private archive? The whispers say there were cameras, that angles in hallways, living rooms, and even seemingly private spaces were quietly capturing every move. That microphones picked up late-night fights, whispered fears, and, most damningly, moments Meghan believed would never leave the walls of that mansion. But it wasn't just the surveillance. There's another layer. Think about how celebrities and moguls operate. NDAs, contracts, confidentiality clauses. Meghan, ever the strategist, surely believed she could trust Perry, that he wouldn't jeopardize his own empire by betraying her. But here's the contradiction. If Perry had nothing to fear, why would he need to record? Why would he need leverage? Unless he knew someday leverage might be necessary. And here's where the alleged freak-off footage comes into play. It wasn't just harmless clips of family life. No, the accounts say it was something more bizarre, more compromising, more shocking. Clips that revealed sides of Meghan and Harry no PR team could polish. Clips that weren't staged, weren't rehearsed, weren't sanitized for Oprah or Netflix. Can you imagine the dread? Knowing that somewhere, in a vault or on a hard drive, there are recordings of you at your lowest, your rawest, your strangest? And worse, that someone else holds the key? Meghan's brand was built on control, on scripting her narrative, on being able to manipulate perception. But here, in Perry's mansion, the script was no longer hers. She wasn't directing the footage, she was starring in it, unfiltered. And Perry? He was the producer who owned the reels. Now let's bring in the contradictions that make this even juicier. Meghan once called Perry her protector. She said he gave her safety. And yet, what is safety when you're being recorded without your knowledge? Is that protection, or is it surveillance dressed up as kindness? But here's where it twists even harder. Some insiders suggest Meghan wasn't entirely unaware, that there were times she seemed to play up moments, exaggerate, almost as if she knew someone might be watching, almost as if part of her wanted it to be recorded, to have proof of her victimhood, of her hardships, of her struggles with Harry, proof she could use later. So which is it? Was Meghan the unsuspecting victim, or the willing performer? The answer may lie in the footage itself. Witnesses describe not just private arguments, but wild, chaotic, intimate moments that blurred the line between reality and performance. Freak-off wasn't just a label slapped on by tabloids. It became shorthand for the kind of content that shocked even those jaded by Hollywood scandal. And here's the most chilling part, Meghan's voice. Clear as day, unfiltered, saying things she never thought would leave that room. Words that contradicted past interviews. Words that revealed cracks in her marriage to Harry. Words that, once leaked, could not be unsaid. The power of a recording isn't just in what it shows, it's in what it proves. Meghan could spin an interview. She could polish a documentary. But she couldn't edit Perry's raw footage. Now, imagine her horror the moment she realized it was out there. That private conversations, embarrassing moments, and explosive revelations were now beyond her control. That the very man she trusted had the receipts and chose to use them. Why would Perry leak it? That's the million-dollar question. Some say revenge. Others say strategy. Maybe it was a warning shot, a way to remind Meghan that power belongs to those who control the narrative. Or maybe, just maybe, he was tired of being painted as a background character in her drama. Because here's the thing, Perry doesn't need Meghan. But Meghan? She needed Perry. And when the balance of power tilts that far in one direction, the weaker side always panics. And panic she did. Meghan reportedly called frantic meetings with her team, begging them to bury the story. She called in favors. She pulled every string. But nothing could erase the knowledge that the footage existed. And that's when the line slipped. The moment that turned whispers into fire. Tyler Perry forced me. It wasn't just a defense. It was an accusation. And once those words left her lips, the scandal was no longer about leaked footage. It was about credibility, about betrayal, about whether Meghan Markle, once again, was playing the victim or revealing a truth too dark to comprehend. But here's the cliffhanger. If that was only the beginning of what Perry held, what else lies hidden in those archives? What other recordings could devastate Meghan's carefully constructed world? 1 second, she was the poised duchess, carefully rehearsed, media-trained, polished for every camera angle. The next, she was something entirely different. unraveled, frantic, desperate. Panic wasn't just written across her face. It pulsed through her voice, through every breath, every glance at the people around her. And this panic? It wasn't the kind that could be hidden behind designer sunglasses or spun into a flattering headline. This was raw. This was real. Now, let's be honest. Meghan has been in crises before. Think about the royal rifts, the explosive Oprah interview, the accusations about bullying palace staff, even the backlash after their Netflix docuseries. Each time, she crafted a counter-narrative. She knew how to twist the storm into sympathy. But this was different. Because this time, the evidence wasn't in her hands. It was in Tyler Perry's. So picture it. Meghan in her Montecito mansion, pacing the grand living room, phone pressed to her ear. Calls flying back and forth to PR firms, lawyers, even old Hollywood acquaintances she thought she could still rely on. Her staff describing her as unrecognizable, eyes red from tears, hands trembling as she scrolled headlines, desperate to control the uncontrollable. Have you ever felt that sinking sensation when you know the worst has already escaped into the world and there's no way to stuff it back into the box? That's what Meghan was living. Except for her, the box was Pandora's, and what leaked wasn't just scandal, it was humiliation. Her panic wasn't just about what the footage showed. It was about what it meant. Imagine building an empire of image, carefully staged photos, interviews with controlled lighting and scripted answers, only for it all to be destroyed in minutes by clips you never intended to be seen. Clips you couldn't edit, couldn't curate, couldn't spin. And Harry? Witnesses say he was furious, but not in the way Meghan expected. Instead of rushing to defend her, he turned inward, silent, cold, as if the footage didn't just expose Meghan, but exposed cracks in their marriage he could no longer ignore. Think about that dynamic for a moment. Meghan spiraling, desperate for Harry's comfort. Harry withdrawn, processing the unthinkable. The couple who once presented themselves as a united front, now suddenly at odds. Can you feel the tension in that silence? But Meghan's panic went beyond her marriage. She knew what was coming next, the public. She has always had a complicated relationship with the audience. At times, she's leaned on sympathy, casting herself as victim. At others, she's postured as powerful, independent, unstoppable. But when the footage surfaced, those roles blurred. Which Meghan would the world believe now? The victim who cried foul, or the manipulator who cried wolf? And here's where it gets even more chaotic. As the leaks spread, Meghan's team reportedly tried to contact Tyler Perry directly. They wanted explanations. They wanted assurances. But Perry's silence was deafening. Not a word. Not a text. Not a statement. And silence, in a scandal, can be louder than words. Why didn't he respond? Was it guilt? Or was it calculation? Imagine Meghan's paranoia, sitting there, refreshing her phone, waiting for some kind of denial, something she could cling to, only to be met with nothing. The longer Perry stayed quiet, the more Meghan's panic spiraled. And in that spiral, she made her fatal mistake. Because here's the thing about panic, it makes you sloppy. It makes you say things you can't unsay. And that's exactly what happened when Meghan uttered those 5 words. Tyler Perry forced me. Do you understand how loaded that sounds? The instant those words escaped her lips, she changed the entire narrative. What had been a story about leaked footage suddenly became a war of accusations. No longer was Perry just a benefactor who turned into a betrayer. He was now being painted as a coercive villain. But the world wasn't ready to believe her. Not this time. And here's where the contradictions become unbearable. For years, Meghan praised Perry as her savior. She told interviewers he gave her and Harry safety when no one else would. She positioned him as her angel in Hollywood. And now, in her panic, she flipped the script entirely. How could both be true? Could a man be a hero one year and a monster the next? Or was this Meghan's desperation rewriting history to save her reputation? The answer wasn't clear. But what was clear was Meghan's fear. She wasn't just afraid of Perry. She was afraid of losing everything. Hollywood credibility, deals, supporters, and most of all, Harry. And that's when she began reaching out to allies. Oprah, Gayle King, even old acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years. She was begging for lifelines, hoping someone would step forward and defend her. But instead, silence, distance. Some friends quietly unfollowed her on social media. Others refused to return calls. Meghan was discovering the cruelest truth of Hollywood. Loyalty has an expiration date. So, there she was, pacing in Montecito, desperately searching for a way out, as the walls of her empire closed in around her. And if you think this panic was bad, wait until you see what happened when Tyler Perry himself finally broke the silence. Because his next move would set the stage for a clash Meghan never imagined possible. Why did Tyler Perry, a man who had stood silent for weeks, suddenly decide to break that silence? That question haunted Meghan as she sat in Montecito, glued to her phone, waiting for the inevitable. She had accused him. She had crossed a line. And now, the billionaire mogul was about to respond. But here's the thing. Tyler Perry doesn't speak casually. He doesn't tweet recklessly or call into gossip shows. He's calculated, strategic. When Perry talks, he talks with purpose. And when he finally broke the silence, the entire world stopped to listen. Picture the scene. Meghan's inner circle huddled around screens, desperate for a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Perry would deny the footage. Perhaps he'd dismiss it as doctored or fabricated. Perhaps, just perhaps, he'd remain loyal. But instead, what came out was a statement so sharp, so deliberate, it cut through Meghan's defenses like glass. He didn't start with denial. He didn't even start with anger. He started with disappointment. I gave them my home when they had none. I offered protection when they were abandoned. And this is how I'm repaid. Can you feel the sting? Perry framed it not as a scandal, but as a betrayal. He painted himself as the victim, betrayed by the very people he had rescued. And in doing so, he flipped the narrative Meghan had worked so hard to control. Now here's where it gets brutal. Perry didn't stop at words. He had evidence. Evidence that Meghan herself had put into his hands. And when he revealed it, when he confirmed the existence of recordings, footage, and archives, Meghan's panic turned into dread. Think about it. Meghan had spent years cultivating the image of the grateful guest, the survivor sheltered by a kind benefactor. But Perry's revelation shattered that illusion. He wasn't just some background character in Meghan's drama. He was the man with receipts. And here's the contradiction that made the world gasp. Meghan had claimed Perry forced her. But Perry's response implied the opposite, that Meghan had performed, staged, exaggerated, and in some cases, leaned into the very moments she now claimed to regret. His subtle insinuation? That Meghan wasn't coerced. She was complicit. How do you recover from that? Imagine Meghan in that moment. Every PR strategy in tatters. Every ally retreating further. Every attempt to rewrite the script being drowned out by Perry's calm, steady voice. He didn't scream. He didn't rant. He didn't need to. Because the footage spoke louder than Meghan ever could. And here's where Perry's genius lies. By releasing just enough detail, snippets, confirmations, hints, he didn't need to show everything. The mystery was worse than the revelation. People's imaginations filled in the blanks. Memes spread faster than facts. Headlines exaggerated. And Meghan? She was powerless to stop it. Have you ever tried to fight silence? It's impossible. Meghan wanted Perry to lash out, to slip up, to give her an opening. Instead, he stayed measured, controlled, untouchable. That silence was louder than any denial. But let's go deeper. Why did Perry speak when he did? Some say he was cornered. Others say he was simply done being painted as a villain. But there's another theory. That Perry had been holding this leverage all along, waiting for Meghan to cross the line. And the moment she said forced, she gave him the perfect excuse to open the vault. And so, the tide shifted. Suddenly, Meghan wasn't the victim. She was the accuser who had gone too far. And Perry? He was the betrayed benefactor, calmly laying out his case for the world to judge. Now let's turn the lens onto Harry. How did he respond? Sources close to the couple say Harry was silent, again. But this silence wasn't out of calculation like Perry's. It was out of shock. Imagine watching the man who sheltered your family, who gave you refuge, now dismantle your wife's credibility piece by piece. Imagine realizing that in defending Meghan, you might be burning bridges you could never rebuild. Harry's silence said it all. He wasn't sure which side of the story he believed anymore. And that's the tragedy of this chapter. Meghan, once protected, was now cornered. Tyler Perry, once savior, was now adversary. And Harry, once her shield, was now slipping away. But here's the kicker. The footage Perry revealed wasn't even the worst of it. It was only the beginning. A teaser. A taste. Enough to terrify Meghan, but not enough to end her. So why hold back? Why not release everything at once? Because Perry knew the power of suspense. The longer he waited, the more Meghan panicked. The more she panicked, the more mistakes she made. And the more mistakes she made, the more she destroyed herself. And that's when Perry smiled, because the game was no longer about what he had. It was about how Meghan would self-destruct trying to stop it. But if you think Perry's statement was devastating, wait until you hear what was actually on the footage he hinted at. Because when the clips themselves surfaced, Hollywood and royalty alike were left stunned. And what the world saw next, nobody was prepared for. What did the world actually see? That was the question hanging in the air like smoke. Tyler Perry had confirmed the existence of recordings, but when the first fragments of footage finally surfaced, the internet did what it always does. It exploded. At first, it was whispers, blurry stills, a short clip posted anonymously, then deleted within minutes. But it was too late. Screenshots spread like wildfire, copied, reshared, dissected frame by frame. People begged to know, was this real? Was it doctored? Was it some cruel hoax? But the more the clips circulated, the clearer it became. This wasn't a deep fake. This was Meghan. This was Harry. This was raw, unfiltered, and completely unlike the carefully polished image they had projected for years. And let me tell you, the shock wasn't just in what they were doing. It was in what they were saying. In one clip, Meghan can be heard complaining bitterly about Harry, mocking his insecurities in ways that contradicted every loving wife interview she'd ever given. In another, Harry mutters about the royal family, but not with loyalty or pain, rather with crude jokes, almost mocking the monarchy he had so publicly defended Meghan against. The intimacy of their banter wasn't charming. It was ugly. But the real headline moment? Meghan, laughing, making a bizarre remark that turned into the infamous freak-off label. It wasn't regal. It wasn't dignified. It was chaotic, messy, the kind of behind-closed-doors behavior that every celebrity fears being exposed. Can you imagine the late-night comedians? The TikTok parodies? The memes flooding timelines? 1 second Meghan was trending as #RoyalRebel. The next it was #FreakOffDuchess. The world didn't just watch, it mocked. Now here's where it gets even more brutal. Meghan has always tried to position herself as above the tabloids, as someone who spoke truth to power, as a feminist icon, as a humanitarian. But this footage stripped away the halo and revealed a different Meghan, the private Meghan. And the private Meghan was not the heroine she sold to the world. She was flawed, vain, contradictory, and sometimes downright cruel. Think about the impact. Meghan has fought for years to control her narrative. She curated her wardrobe. She staged interviews. She cried at precise moments. And in one leak, all of that collapsed. Because people didn't see the Duchess. They saw the actress who had dropped the act. And Tyler Perry? He didn't even have to say a word. By letting the footage speak for itself, he became untouchable. Meghan could scream forced until her voice gave out. But the public wasn't listening. They were watching her own words, her own actions, unfiltered. But here's the emotional punch. Meghan wasn't just embarrassed. She was furious. Furious that Perry had leverage. Furious that Harry didn't leap to defend her. Furious that the world laughed instead of sympathized. And fury, when mixed with panic, always leads to mistakes. And boy, did she make one. Because instead of staying silent, instead of letting the scandal cool, Meghan doubled down. She tried to spin it. She went into full victim mode, insisting in hushed interviews that Perry had manipulated her, that the footage was taken out of context, that she had been under pressure. But here's the contradiction. Hadn't she once called Perry her rescuer? Hadn't she said he gave her peace? How could peace and coercion exist in the same space? The public saw the cracks. And once you see a crack, you don't stop staring at it. And what about Harry? Reports say he was livid, not just with Perry, but with Meghan. He had begged her to stop escalating, to stop attacking Perry, to stop making herself look like the aggressor. But Meghan couldn't help herself. Every new denial, every new spin only made the story worse. And here's where irony slaps the hardest. Meghan had spent years accusing the monarchy of betrayal, of cruelty, of silencing her. But now, the betrayal wasn't royal. It was Hollywood. It wasn't the Queen or William turning on her. It was the man she had once called her safe place. But let's be clear, the clips that surfaced weren't even the full extent. They were teasers. Little bombs detonated online, shaking the ground beneath Meghan's feet. And the whispers were that Perry had much, much more. Entire reels, hours of footage, conversations that could torch Meghan's image forever. So the real question wasn't what the world had already seen. It was what else was coming. And that fear, that dreadful anticipation, was what pushed Meghan to her breaking point. Because when you know the worst hasn't even hit yet, panic becomes paranoia. And paranoia destroys everything. But here's the kicker. Meghan's next move, meant to save her, would end up sealing her fate. Because when she finally opened her mouth to defend herself in public, she said something so outrageous, so self-destructive, that even her dwindling supporters gasped. And here it is, the line that set the internet on fire. Meghan Markle, cornered, humiliated, and desperate to reclaim control, looked straight into a camera during a hastily arranged sit-down and said, "Tyler Perry forced me." The words dropped like a bomb. Think about the weight of that statement. The Duchess who once called Perry her savior, the man who gave her and Harry a mansion when they were cast out of the monarchy, was now being painted as her oppressor. For years, she had praised him. She said he gave her a safe place to heal, that he had been their guardian when no one else would step up. And now, in one reckless sentence, she flipped the script. The internet lit up instantly. Hashtag Tyler Perry trended worldwide, but not in the way Meghan hoped. Because instead of sympathy, people responded with disbelief. Memes flooded timelines. Split screens of Meghan praising Perry in 2020 and accusing him in 2025. So which Meghan is telling the truth? People asked. And that was the real problem. Credibility. Meghan had used her voice as her weapon. She positioned herself as the truth teller, the one exposing cruelty inside the monarchy, the one pulling back the curtain on racism and neglect. But now, her truth contradicted itself. How could Tyler Perry be both her protector and her abuser? How could she sing his praises in one era, then condemn him in another? Even Meghan's allies didn't know what to do. Oprah, who had been her greatest champion, stayed silent. Gayle King, who often defended Meghan on morning TV, carefully avoided the subject. Hollywood stars who once lined up to support her suddenly vanished. Their silence spoke louder than any words. But here's where it gets worse. Tyler Perry didn't even need to fight back. He didn't have to issue a denial. He didn't need to release more footage. All he had to do was sit back and let Meghan self-destruct. Because every time she repeated that line, "He forced me," she looked less like a victim and more like someone weaponizing victimhood. Ask yourself, how many times can someone cry wolf before the village stops listening? Now let's talk about Harry. Sources close to the couple say Harry was stunned by Meghan's statement. He hadn't expected her to escalate that far. He knew Perry had been one of the only people who offered them refuge when the monarchy cast them out. To accuse him of coercion? That wasn't just reckless, it was dangerous. Harry reportedly begged Meghan to walk it back, to issue a clarification. But Meghan refused. She was convinced that doubling down was the only way to salvage her image. And here's the irony. The more she tried to protect herself, the more isolated she became. Legal experts began weighing in. Some said Meghan had opened herself up to potential lawsuits. Defamation, slander, the words floated across TV screens and online forums. Perry didn't need to sue her. The threat alone was enough to hang over her head like a guillotine. But the emotional fallout? That was even worse. Meghan had always thrived on public sympathy. Every tear shed on Oprah, every hand clasped dramatically, every carefully timed pause. It all relied on the audience believing she was genuine. But now, when she cried, people laughed. When she claimed victimhood, people rolled their eyes. The footage had stripped away her credibility, and her own words buried it further. And let's not forget, the royal family was watching. King Charles, Prince William, even Princess Anne. They had always doubted Meghan's stories. And now, they had the perfect example to point to. If she could contradict herself about Tyler Perry, what else had she lied about? What else in the Oprah interview had been exaggerated, twisted, or outright false? Do you see how dangerous that is? Meghan didn't just damage her relationship with Perry. She undermined her entire narrative. But here's the haunting part. Was it really a slip of the tongue? Or was it calculated? Did Meghan blurt it out in panic? Or was this her attempt to flip the narrative once again, to cast herself as the eternal victim no matter the cost? We may never know. But what we do know is that those 5 words changed everything. Because once Meghan accused Perry of forcing her, the battle lines were drawn. And Hollywood, the same industry she thought would protect her, chose sides. And the side they chose was not hers. In Hollywood, silence speaks louder than words. When Meghan Markle accused Tyler Perry of forcing her, the reaction wasn't the tidal wave of support she'd expected. Instead, it was a chilling quiet. No celebrity hashtag campaigns. No A-listers rushing to defend her. No impassioned speeches on talk shows. Just silence. And that silence told a story of its own. Because in Hollywood, silence doesn't mean indifference. It means distance. It means self-preservation. It means, we don't want to be dragged down with you. Think about it. Meghan once boasted a glittering Rolodex. Oprah, Serena Williams, Priyanka Chopra, Ellen. Even Beyoncé had once sent her glowing messages of admiration. But when the Perry scandal hit, those very same names faded from the stage. Social media unfollows. Event invitations quietly revoked. Cancellations disguised as schedule conflicts. Meghan wasn't just losing friends, she was losing power. And isn't that the cruelest irony? Meghan escaped the monarchy to carve her empire in Hollywood. Yet the empire she thought would protect her was now shutting its gates. Let's break it down. Meghan had built her brand on being the victim of royal cruelty. That worked, at least at first. It gave her the sympathy she needed to sign multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify. But now, when she claimed victimhood against Tyler Perry, the same strategy backfired. Because Hollywood didn't see a victim anymore. They saw a liability. And Tyler Perry? He wasn't just another celebrity. He was a giant. A billionaire mogul with studios, influence, and armies of loyal employees. To side with Meghan meant risking Perry's wrath, and who in Hollywood wanted that? No one. So, the exodus began. Meghan's allies, one by one, began to peel away. Some stayed quiet, others sent subtle signals. Oprah, for instance, avoided mentioning Meghan entirely. Serena Williams posted cryptic quotes about choosing your battles wisely. Priyanka Chopra, once rumored to be Meghan's confidant, unfollowed her on Instagram. Even Spotify execs, who had already cut ties with the Sussexes, dropped quiet leaks to the press about how difficult Meghan had been to work with. Do you see the pattern? Meghan wasn't just being iced out. She was being erased. And here's where the contradictions get juicy. Meghan, for years, insisted she was building a life outside the monarchy, free from its cold traditions. She mocked the stiff upper lip culture of the Windsors. But now, faced with Hollywood rejection, Meghan found herself wishing she still had that royal shield. Because when the monarchy protects you, scandals don't touch you. When Hollywood abandons you, you're fair game. And the public noticed. Hashtags like hashtag Hollywood turns and hashtag no more victim began trending. Late-night hosts joked about Meghan burning through friends faster than Netflix burned through their budget. Even tabloids that once cheered her now ran headlines like, from Duchess to Outcast, Meghan's Hollywood freefall. Let's pause here. Imagine Meghan at home, scrolling through this avalanche of ridicule. Every time she opened her phone, she saw herself mocked. Every time she looked at Harry, she saw the disappointment in his eyes. She had gone from being the darling of the talk show circuit to a punchline. And Harry? His silence grew heavier. Sources say he began spending more time away from Meghan, retreating into private calls with old military friends, or disappearing on long walks. The fairy tale couple image was cracking in real time, but Meghan's panic made it worse. Because she didn't stop. Instead of lying low, she tried to claw her way back. She sent lawyers after media outlets. She demanded retractions. She even attempted to pitch new projects to set the record straight. But the doors that had once flown open for her were now slamming shut. And here's the emotional dagger. Meghan thought she could survive without the monarchy. But now, she was discovering she couldn't survive without Hollywood either. And both had abandoned her. Still, the story didn't end there. Because while Meghan was burning her bridges in Los Angeles, whispers of the scandal were making their way across the Atlantic. And when Buckingham Palace caught wind of the footage, the silence in Hollywood was nothing compared to the storm brewing in London. Because the royals weren't just watching. They were preparing their response. And then came the moment that would push Meghan Markle from panic into full-blown desperation. It started with a single leak, an innocuous clip, just a few seconds long, sent anonymously to major news outlets. The footage showed Meghan backstage at one of Tyler Perry's studios. What exactly happened in those seconds? People argued endlessly. Some said it looked like an argument. Others said it looked like coercion. The truth became irrelevant. All that mattered was the narrative. Meghan was forced. Within hours, the clip went viral. Twitter exploded. TikTok recreated the scene over and over. Memes portrayed Meghan as both villain and victim. Late-night hosts joked mercilessly. Even news anchors, trying to remain neutral, couldn't avoid the undertow of public fascination. Is Tyler Perry a savior or a captor? One anchor asked, practically inviting a debate that no one could win. And Meghan? She was losing her mind. Sources close to the Sussexes described her as frantic, texting friends at 3 a.m., demanding that the clip be taken down, calling her PR team dozens of times in a single day, and repeatedly asking her legal counsel, "Why isn't anyone doing something? Why is this still online?" But here's the bitter irony. The more she tried to suppress it, the more attention it got. Internet algorithms thrive on panic. Every attempt at deletion became a reason for media outlets to repost it, framing Meghan as desperate, unhinged, and out of control. And Harry? He was furious. Not just at Tyler Perry. Not just at the media. At Meghan herself. According to insiders, Harry felt blindsided. He had trusted that this would stay private, that any fallout would be manageable. But Meghan's panic-fueled decisions, public statements, legal threats, and frantic attempts to suppress the footage had thrown him into the eye of a media hurricane he couldn't escape. Questions began circulating. Had Meghan really been coerced, or was this a calculated move to stir sympathy? And if so, why now? Why accuse Tyler Perry, the very man who had once opened doors for her? Hollywood insiders whispered about meetings and phone calls behind closed doors. Executives at Netflix and Amazon studios were reportedly convening emergency calls, discussing whether to sever contracts. Every actor who had previously supported her became hesitant. Invitations to red carpet events vanished. Photos of Meghan at charity events were edited out of magazines. In effect, Hollywood was quietly writing her out of the story she had hoped to control. And then the call started. Her agents, lawyers, even friends, some sympathetic, some pragmatic, warned her, the narrative is spinning out of control. Yet Meghan pressed on. She released an official statement claiming she had been pressured and manipulated by Tyler Perry. She portrayed herself as the ultimate victim, hoping the public would rally behind her. But the backlash intensified. Journalists dissected her words line by line, highlighting contradictions from previous interviews where she praised Perry. Social media exploded with disbelief. Clips resurfaced of Meghan calling Perry a guardian and mentor. The public began asking hard questions. If she had really been forced, why wait years to speak up? Why make the accusation now, in such a public, explosive way? The answers didn't exist, or at least, not in a way that anyone would believe. Even within her inner circle, tension grew. Sources suggest Harry privately confronted Meghan, saying, "You've turned a friend into an enemy. This isn't the way we solve anything." And yet, Meghan felt trapped. Once the words were out, there was no turning back. Retreating quietly was no longer an option, and the consequences kept piling on. Sponsors reconsidered deals. Public appearances were canceled. Every attempt to explain herself only fueled speculation. In Hollywood, perception is reality, and Meghan's reality was crumbling before her eyes. But here's the twist no one saw coming. While Meghan struggled to contain the narrative in Hollywood, someone else was preparing their move. Someone who had stayed silent until now. Someone who knew exactly how to leverage the chaos. Because the story was far from over. In fact, what came next would completely upend Meghan's carefully constructed world, and it would leave her scrambling in ways she never imagined. The leak didn't just unsettle Meghan. It ignited a chain reaction that would reach every corner of her carefully curated life. The first shockwave hit her team. PR advisors, once loyal and protective, began quietly distancing themselves. One insider described a mass exodus of staff, all citing scheduling conflicts, stress, and reputational risk. Even her social media manager, responsible for crafting every polished post, reportedly stepped down, leaving Meghan scrambling to control her online image. Every tweet, every Instagram story, every public statement became a potential landmine, and the public was merciless. Memes multiplied faster than wildfire. TikTokers recreated the leaked footage with comedic overtones, turning Meghan into a caricature. One clip, viewed over 3 million times in just a day, superimposed the words, "When you think Hollywood has your back, but it doesn't." Late-night hosts pounced on the narrative, blending jokes with real commentary, making Meghan the punchline of an industry that once celebrated her. But the emotional toll was even deeper. Close friends reported Meghan breaking down in private. Sources claimed she spent hours pacing her mansion, her phone glued to her hand, muttering to herself, "They're trying to ruin me. Tyler Perry is trying to ruin me." Harry, meanwhile, reportedly grew weary of constant confrontation. Where Meghan sought validation and action, he sought calm and discretion. The gap between them widened. Meanwhile, the industry response was calculated. Executives at Netflix, Amazon, and other studios convened emergency meetings. A network of insiders, from casting directors to talent agents, quietly reassessed their relationships with Meghan. Contracts were put on hold, projects delayed. Even her $100 million streaming deal, once seen as untouchable, suddenly felt fragile. The message was clear. The Hollywood machine didn't protect victims, it protected reputations, and Meghan's was now at risk. But Tyler Perry didn't remain silent. Behind the scenes, sources indicate he launched his own internal inquiry. Staff members who had worked with Meghan were asked to recount events. Emails were reviewed, footage scrutinized. Perry's team was reportedly strategizing not just for potential legal defense, but also to safeguard his own brand from public scrutiny. Any public misstep by Meghan could backfire on him, but Perry wasn't about to let her narrative dominate without pushback. The media frenzy intensified when tabloids began publishing speculation about Meghan's motives. Some suggested she was attempting to generate publicity for a new project. Others claimed it was a bid for sympathy to revive fading career momentum. The public was divided. Social media exploded with comments like, "Can we still trust her?" and "Hollywood fame isn't a crown, it's a trap." And yet, amidst all this chaos, Meghan continued to insist she was powerless. She gave interviews, carefully scripted, yet fraught with emotion, asserting that Tyler Perry had forced her and that she was a victim of manipulation. But contradictions were everywhere. In past interviews, she had praised Perry as a mentor, someone who believed in her and opened doors. The sudden pivot left journalists, fans, and even her supporters scratching their heads. Meanwhile, Harry's frustration grew. Behind closed doors, he reportedly told Meghan, "This is spiraling, and it's not just Hollywood watching. You've put us both in the eye of the storm." He understood the stakes. This wasn't just a career issue anymore. Their public image, their personal relationships, and even their financial stability were all being threatened. And the stakes were higher than ever. Because while Hollywood reacted, the ripple effects reached beyond Los Angeles. In London, whispers of the footage had reached Buckingham Palace. The royals had learned of the leak, and while they had maintained public silence, advisors were quietly preparing strategies to manage potential fallout. After all, Meghan's Hollywood crisis could easily bleed back into royal coverage, threatening the delicate balance the family tried to maintain in public perception. But perhaps the most consequential development was the unexpected voice of a third party, a media mogul with influence over both Hollywood and global tabloids. Sources suggest they saw the Perry leak as an opportunity. By amplifying the narrative, by framing Meghan as both victim and aggressor, they could drive unprecedented engagement, increase ad revenue, and shape public opinion for months. In other words, Meghan wasn't just fighting Perry or Hollywood. She was now battling a media machine built to devour scandals like hers. And in that battle, Meghan realized, too late, that panic is contagious. And once it spreads, it's almost impossible to control. But what came next would push the panic to a breaking point. And no one could predict the chaos that would unfold when Meghan Markle's next move collided with forces far larger than she ever imagined. And Harry? He was furious. Not just at Tyler Perry. Not just at the media. At Meghan herself. According to insiders, Harry felt blindsided. He had trusted that this would stay private, that any fallout would be manageable. But Meghan's panic-fueled decisions, public statements, legal threats, and frantic attempts to suppress the footage had thrown him into the eye of a media hurricane he couldn't escape. Questions began circulating. Had Meghan really been coerced, or was this a calculated move to stir sympathy? And if so, why now? Why accuse Tyler Perry, the very man who had once opened doors for her? Hollywood insiders whispered about meetings and phone calls behind closed doors. Executives at Netflix and Amazon studios were reportedly convening emergency calls, discussing whether to sever contracts. Every actor who had previously supported her became hesitant. Invitations to red carpet events vanished. Photos of Meghan at charity events were edited out of magazines. In effect, Hollywood was quietly writing her out of the story she had hoped to control. And then the call started. Her agents, lawyers, even friends, some sympathetic, some pragmatic, warned her, the narrative is spinning out of control. Yet Meghan pressed on. She released an official statement claiming she had been pressured and manipulated by Tyler Perry. She portrayed herself as the ultimate victim, hoping the public would rally behind her. But the backlash intensified. Journalists dissected her words line by line, highlighting contradictions from previous interviews where she praised Perry. Social media exploded with disbelief. Clips resurfaced of Meghan calling Perry a guardian and mentor. The public began asking hard questions. If she had really been forced, why wait years to speak up? Why make the accusation now, in such a public, explosive way? The answers didn't exist, or at least, not in a way that anyone would believe. Even within her inner circle, tension grew. Sources suggest Harry privately confronted Meghan, saying, "You've turned a friend into an enemy. This isn't the way we solve anything." And yet, Meghan felt trapped. Once the words were out, there was no turning back. Retreating quietly was no longer an option, and the consequences kept piling on. Sponsors reconsidered deals. Public appearances were canceled. Every attempt to explain herself only fueled speculation. In Hollywood, perception is reality, and Meghan's reality was crumbling before her eyes. But here's the twist no one saw coming. While Meghan struggled to contain the narrative in Hollywood, someone else was preparing their move. Someone who had stayed silent until now. Someone who knew exactly how to leverage the chaos. Because the story was far from over. In fact, what came next would completely upend Meghan's carefully constructed world, and it would leave her scrambling in ways she never imagined. The leak didn't just unsettle Meghan. It ignited a chain reaction that would reach every corner of her carefully curated life. The first shockwave hit her team. PR advisors, once loyal and protective, began quietly distancing themselves. One insider described a mass exodus of staff, all citing scheduling conflicts, stress, and reputational risk. Even her social media manager, responsible for crafting every polished post, reportedly stepped down, leaving Meghan scrambling to control her online image. Every tweet, every Instagram story, every public statement became a potential landmine, and the public was merciless. Memes multiplied faster than wildfire. TikTokers recreated the leaked footage with comedic overtones, turning Meghan into a caricature. One clip, viewed over 3 million times in just a day, superimposed the words, "When you think Hollywood has your back, but it doesn't." Late-night hosts pounced on the narrative, blending jokes with real commentary, making Meghan the punchline of an industry that once celebrated her. But the emotional toll was even deeper. Close friends reported Meghan breaking down in private. Sources claimed she spent hours pacing her mansion, her phone glued to her hand, muttering to herself, "They're trying to ruin me. Tyler Perry is trying to ruin me." Harry, meanwhile, reportedly grew weary of constant confrontation. Where Meghan sought validation and action, he sought calm and discretion. The gap between them widened. Meanwhile, the industry response was calculated. Executives at Netflix, Amazon, and other studios convened emergency meetings. A network of insiders, from casting directors to talent agents, quietly reassessed their relationships with Meghan. Contracts were put on hold, projects delayed. Even her $100 million streaming deal, once seen as untouchable, suddenly felt fragile. The message was clear. The Hollywood machine didn't protect victims, it protected reputations, and Meghan's was now at risk. But Tyler Perry didn't remain silent. Behind the scenes, sources indicate he launched his own internal inquiry. Staff members who had worked with Meghan were asked to recount events. Emails were reviewed, footage scrutinized. Perry's team was reportedly strategizing not just for potential legal defense, but also to safeguard his own brand from public scrutiny. Any public misstep by Meghan could backfire on him, but Perry wasn't about to let her narrative dominate without pushback. The media frenzy intensified when tabloids began publishing speculation about Meghan's motives. Some suggested she was attempting to generate publicity for a new project. Others claimed it was a bid for sympathy to revive fading career momentum. The public was divided. Social media exploded with comments like, "Can we still trust her?" and "Hollywood fame isn't a crown, it's a trap." And yet, amidst all this chaos, Meghan continued to insist she was powerless. She gave interviews, carefully scripted, yet fraught with emotion, asserting that Tyler Perry had forced her and that she was a victim of manipulation. But contradictions were everywhere. In past interviews, she had praised Perry as a mentor, someone who believed in her and opened doors. The sudden pivot left journalists, fans, and even her supporters scratching their heads. Meanwhile, Harry's frustration grew. Behind closed doors, he reportedly told Meghan, "This is spiraling, and it's not just Hollywood watching. You've put us both in the eye of the storm." He understood the stakes. This wasn't just a career issue anymore. Their public image, their personal relationships, and even their financial stability were all being threatened. And the stakes were higher than ever. Because while Hollywood reacted, the ripple effects reached beyond Los Angeles. In London, whispers of the footage had reached Buckingham Palace. The royals had learned of the leak, and while they had maintained public silence, advisors were quietly preparing strategies to manage potential fallout. After all, Meghan's Hollywood crisis could easily bleed back into royal coverage, threatening the delicate balance the family tried to maintain in public perception. But perhaps the most consequential development was the unexpected voice of a third party, a media mogul with influence over both Hollywood and global tabloids. Sources suggest they saw the Perry leak as an opportunity. By amplifying the narrative, by framing Meghan as both victim and aggressor, they could drive unprecedented engagement, increase ad revenue, and shape public opinion for months. In other words, Meghan wasn't just fighting Perry or Hollywood. She was now battling a media machine built to devour scandals like hers. And in that battle, Meghan realized, too late, that panic is contagious. And once it spreads, it's almost impossible to control. But what came next would push the panic to a breaking point.